should have plenty of room here for everyone. All right. Well, my name is Kent Ziegler. I'm president of the Oregon City Business Alliance, and we are thrilled and honored to have such an amazing turnout today for this update on the Tumwata Village at the former Blue Heron site. I previewed the slides that our speakers are going to be sharing with us today, and there's a lot of great information there, a lot of colored illustrations. I think you're going to come away from our event today with a lot more knowledge and understanding of their vision for the property, not only from a cultural, historical, environmental, but also from an economic standpoint. But if you do have questions that you have after they make their PowerPoint presentations, if you've been to our forums before, you know the blue cards on your table are our question cards. And we will have representatives from the Oregon City Business Alliance come around and pick up those cards from you at the end of their talks. And then we'll get into the questions. I'll try to cluster them in a topic that overlaps so that we don't keep asking the same question or not, because there probably is a lot of people that are wondering the same thing. When will it be done? So we have two speakers today. Ryan Webb is the manager for the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. He's an engineering and planning manager. For the past 16 years, he's worked on various government agencies developing, designing, and constructing public infrastructure. For the last 4 years, he has worked for the tribe managing their projects ranging from streets and utilities to housing development to commercial buildings for essential services. So we're happy to have you here with us, Ryan. Thank you. Our other speaker is Kristen. You're going to have to help me out with this one. Sakarovich. Okay. I didn't mess that up too bad. Kristen is the Community Development Manager for the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. As a professional engineer, she has overseen and directed community development and engineering work in both the public and private sectors for the past 17 years. Kristen has worked on the Grand Ronde tribe for the last 3 years and oversees tribal planning and the tribe's grants management program. So welcome, Kristen and Ryan. All right, my time is up. So I'm going to turn it over to our speakers. I think we're going to start out with Kristen. So it's all yours, Kristen. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right. I'm going to, well, it does go in there. Okay. Okay. Ooh. How about now? Good? Okay, great. Thank you all. Well, thank you all so much for being here today. We're really excited always to talk about Tumwata Village. And so this is a really wonderful opportunity to tell you all about sort of the work that the tribe has been doing and what's coming for the future. So I have to laugh. Everyone always asks, when will it be done? And I think through this presentation, you'll see there's a lot of work to be done. And so it takes a lot of collaboration and partnership, and we're really looking forward to that work in front of us. So a little bit of sort of introduction. I know I was given one, but wanted to highlight a couple of additional items. So my name is Kristen Svakarovich. It's all the letters in the alphabet, so thank you for that. I am the Community Development Manager at the tribe. I oversee our planning program and our grants program. And then I also am a professional engineer, so I worked in the public and private sector. I also was a city councilor for the city of Dundee for 6 years. Woo, yes, go Dundee. Come visit us. I've really enjoyed my time there during the construction of the Newburgh-Dundee bypass. So that was, yeah, yes, woo. So also important sort of contextualizing sort of the presentation today and connection. In tribal community, it's always who is your family and how are you connected to place. So Ryan and I are both married to Grand Ronde tribal members, and so our spouses are both descendant of Joseph Shangretta, who is a Willamette Valley Treaty signer. So the Willamette Valley Treaty of 1855 is the treaty of this place. And Joseph was one of the treaty signers of that. And as a child and adult moved through this space that we know as Oregon City today, it was called Tumwata. So that's our connection to place. So I'm going to also, before we move off of this slide, excuse me, wanted to point out two important items. One of them being the logo in the upper left-hand corner there. So that logo is a petroglyph, reflective of a petroglyph that can actually be found in the falls. And so it's really important for the tribe, when the tribe was talking about branding for the site, is being authentic to this place and the connection to this place. And so that logo being a petroglyph is really important. Also, Tumwata Village is lowercase, and that is intentional. You'll see it written that way coming from the tribe. And the reason for that is it's consistent with the Chinook-Wawa language, which is the tribal language of the Grand Ronde people. And Tumwata meaning tum-tum, which is like a heartbeat, and the Willamette Falls being the center of this region and being the heart of this region. So that's sort of context for as our conversation today. All right. So we did talk a little bit about some of, I know you've been hearing lots of conversations about this property for a long period of time. So the tribe purchased the property in 2019. We did a master plan, sort of original visioning, and released it in March of 2021. And what you'll hear today is really a refinement of that original vision document that was released. And so this additional information really builds on sort of, adding detail about square footage and building footprint and where utilities are going. And it really sets the stage for redevelopment on site. And it's meant for the tribe and tribal members and community members and other local area governments to have a really good understanding of where the tribe is going and what we see redevelopment on this property looking like. And so then the image there on the left is, the right. I'm so used to being able to see the presentation in front of me. I'm like, sorry. So the image there on the right is sort of the tribe's core 4 values for redevelopment. And so this came about with a variety of work sessions with tribal council and ensuring that redevelopment includes sort of the considerations for spirit, place, prosperity, and people, with the central goal of healing on site. And so we, as a design team, when we went through sort of this planning and this iterative process, are always going back to these core values and ensuring that our design and what we're proposing is in alignment. Oh gosh, that's a little bit small up there. So I'll describe it. So the map there on the left shows the 7 different treaties that were signed by the Grand Ronde people that removed them from the 14 million acre homelands to the Grand Ronde Reservation. And so there were 7 different treaties there. You can see Tumwata up at the top. That is part of the Willamette Valley Treaty of 1855. And that treaty was signed by the Clackamas and the Kalaallewa people, along with their nearby neighbors, the Multnomah, the Kalapuya, Multnomah Cascades, and the Watlala. And so those folks all were removed to the Grand Ronde Indian Reservation with the Willamette Valley Treaty of 1855. And then some of the imagery there on the right, you can see eeling happening, or lamprey harvesting happening at the falls. And then the upper right, the tribe goes to the American Museum of Natural History every year to visit Tamanoas, which you probably all know is a Willamette meteorite. So Tamanoas is a really important cultural item to the tribe and is of this place. So the importance of the site, and we talk about sort of why here. When you look at the map there on the left, what you can see is sort of Tumwata Village in the foreground. It's a 23-acre property, and it's proximate to historic village sites. So across the river in Westland, you'll see the Chirkawa Village, which is the Willamette band of the Tumwatas on the Westland side, and then you'll see the village at Kazakshik downriver there. And so really, when the tribe was looking at this property, it was an opportunity to reclaim culturally important site within the tribe's homeland proximate to historic village sites. And that's really why this site is so important to the tribe. It's an ability to really reclaim or claim a sacred place. Let's see. So this image was actually pulled forward from the 2021 vision document. And it's important, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about here because it really shows the tribe's connection to place over time. And so the Grand Ronde people have stories which are called econom. And the econom is a Chinakwawa word, and it means creation stories. And so the tribe has creation stories that have been passed down through generations that tell stories about events like the Missoula floods. So when we talk about from time immemorial, it's often a hard time for people to understand, well, what does that mean? So we have stories that we know go back to at least the Missoula floods, which happened 13 to 18,000 years ago. And so that's roughly 500 generations of Grand Ronde people living on that land, living on this landscape. And so you really start to understand sort of that deep history and connection of the Grand Ronde people to this place. And you compare that sort of time period to this period of persistence, which is sort of that middle chunk there, which is really like 1820 to 2011. And that's roughly 6 or 7 generations, right? And so it's not about sort of one period of history being more important than the other, but it's additive, and it's really about having a better understanding. I think a lot of the work and sort of visioning that happened on this site prior to the tribe's ownership was really focused on 6 to 7 generations instead of telling a more inclusive history of all of the people that have moved through this site. And that is really our goal with a lot of the work that we're doing, is to ensure that we're telling a more inclusive and robust story on site. And so talking about building partnerships. So this is one of the ways that the tribe is trying to do some of that healing work on site. So as land stewards, the tribe really views its role and responsibility to tell a more comprehensive story on site and about the different people that have moved through the site. And so with that, these are some of the partners that we've been building relationships with. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about different folks and sort of what we've been doing with them. So the first one being the Chinese Diaspora Project coming out of Southern Oregon University. So Dr. Chelsea Rose is doing work. And we know that there were Chinese people who lived on site during various periods of time, and so we have contracted with them to get a better understanding, sort of a desktop survey review of all of that information that they can find about the Chinese people moving on site, so that when we end up doing ground disturbance and objects are identified, we have that relationship and context already in place to have an understanding of what those items might mean and how to appropriately care for them. The other partnership that we've been working on is with Oregon Black Pioneers in regards to Jacob Vanderpool, which, if you don't know, he was the only known African American who was expelled out of Oregon under Oregon's exclusion laws. And so there's been a lot of sort of social media support back and forth between the tribe and Oregon Black Pioneers around Juneteenth and other important sort of dates in history that are important for both Jacob Vanderpool and the tribe. The other sort of coordination relationship that we've been building is with the Hawaiian Civic Club of Oregon. We know that there was a Kanaka or Hawaiian vocational school on site in the 1850s, and so wanting to ensure that that story also has a place to be told on our site, and building that relationship so that there's sort of that authenticity, and ensuring that, you know, we're not telling other people's stories, they're telling their own stories. And then some additional sort of collaborations in that last row. So one of the really amazing partnerships that the tribe has is with Oregon State University. And so when we purchased the property in 2019, we were approached by them and their geomatic engineering program. And their geomatic engineering program is really sort of state of the art. They're using lasers and LiDAR and robotic dogs to go into buildings and do 3D scans. So one of the things that we've developed is an entire 3D model rendering of the site. And as buildings come down, we go back in and we rescan. So you can actually put on VR headset and walk through the entire site. And that is allowed us to capture a lot of the historical information. It's also helping us with some of our redevelopment efforts to understand the topography and different elements on site. And it's been, for them, it's a really amazing partnership because it's really training that next level, our next generation of geomatic engineers. There's also a really wonderful collaboration happening with Willamette University with Dr. Scott Pike. He's an anthropology professor there. His passion is bricks. Everyone has to have a passion. I love it, right? So his passion is historic bricks and masonry, and there are a lot of bricks on our site. And so with that, those bricks oftentimes came in as ballast on ships. So they came in to weigh the ships down, and they were removed off the ships, and they were loaded with whatever material good of the moment was being produced on site and sent back out. And so what's happening is there's all this material science analysis happening on bricks that are starting to tell this global trade network about where bricks are coming to and from the site. And it's really just a remarkable body of work. And then our tribal council couldn't be here today, certainly sends their regards, but wanting to highlight some of the different organizations that they're involved with as board members and other contributing parties. So. And let's see. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the site, and then eventually I'll hand it off to Ryan. I'm trying to watch my time. Hopefully I'm doing okay. All right. So talking about private on-site redevelopment and sort of what that will look like. And really for the tribe, it's about integration of cultural identity is like the key theme. And so cultural identity being integrated into the public spaces and buildings and infrastructure, and really sort of taking a Chinookan art aesthetic approach, which is really about beautification of utilitarian objects and ensuring that they are consistent and reflect cultural identity. And it's consistent with not only cultural identity, but cultural teaching of keeping it living. And so one of the examples that I like to talk about, like what is the cultural teaching of keeping it living? Wapato woman up here is a good example of that, and I'll try to walk you through it. So Wapato woman, she lives at Rude Bridge Park, I can never get that out of my mouth, in the city of Hillsborough. And she was a sculpture done by Travis Stewart, who is a tribal artisan. And you'll notice that her face is done in cedar, so it's a cedar carving, but her body is not. And I think that is a reflection of understanding that we keep the traditions living even if the sort of new inputs change. I think at one point in time she could have been completely carved, but we know that cedar is a limited resource, and so her face is an accent piece that's being carved in this instance. She lives outside, so we know that over time that she will deteriorate, and someone will need to reimagine what Wapato woman looks like. Her face will need to be recarved by someone. And so that is our obligation to keep the carving practice living, right? We have to ensure that we have generations of carvers to ensure that someone down the line will reimagine Wapato woman and reimagine what her face could look like for sort of future generations. So it's that continual keeping it living, keeping interaction with objects on the landscape. So we talk about Tumwata Village and sort of what does redevelopment look like on site. And it really is a modern tribal village is the intent. And so it'll be a combination of mixed-use spaces and retail and shopping, residential, office, probably a boutique hotel on site. And so you'll see sort of imageries of some of the activities. So, active open space, probably near the center of the site. Maybe some more private cultural type spaces throughout the site. But really the intent is it's a place where when you come in, the tribe is really putting its values into action, and it's a place where obligations and responsibilities to the plants and animals and the people are realized, and we really hope that it's a model for other folks to really embrace that ethos the value on not just redevelopment, but healing. And so this is sort of our handing off point between Ryan and I, so I'll talk about a couple items here. A couple of things that I'm really excited about that I wanted to point out is the Metro RTP, which you're like, what? But the tribe worked really hard, and big shout out to Katie McDonald, so thank you. Who's Metro's tribal liaison. The tribe worked really hard to get the street network on the Tumwata Village site in the Metro Regional Transportation Plan. It was in there, it was pulled out, the tribe was notified that it had no longer in there, and we scrambled really, really hard to put that project back in and get it adopted. And that is so important because it sets us up for federal funding. And it allows us to go after grant dollars to build the road networks. And we're really, really proud and excited about that work. And thank you to Katie for helping us get that through. Also, the master plan amendment. So Willamette Falls Legacy Project Master Plan was adopted in 2014 for this site. The tribe, there hasn't been really any progress on that master plan since it was originally adopted. There's a lot of things in the master plan that just don't make sense anymore. Some of the buildings on site that were called out for restoration and redevelopment are beginning to actually fall in on themselves. So we are going back into the city probably at the end of September and submitting a master plan amendment. So it'll be the Tumwata Village Master Plan, and it will amend the original Willamette Falls Legacy Project Master Plan, and it'll provide some of the tribe's updates that we've talked about, sort of the focus on healing and restoration, and updates to some of the land use conditions of approval in regards to building, and which ones maybe no longer make sense to be retained. So, and with that, I will hand it off to Ryan.
Okay, I'm probably just going to walk around a little bit and talk about this, but building on what Kristen was saying related to kind of plans and master plans, we've also been able in this time to get this street network on our own tribal transportation plan. So that means that we can leverage funds through the Bureau of Indian Affairs to again get funding to be able to construct the infrastructure and utilities on the site. And that same token, we were awarded some appropriations funding back in 2022, I believe it was, to the tune of $2 million, which is for us to do the first phase of infrastructure and utilities on site, and we're kind of calling that block 1. And so on the right hand side here, you'll see really that's setting up the initial phase of street infrastructure on the site. And so it will take you off 99E at the elbow onto Water Avenue, parallel the river, all the way to 4th Avenue. That takes you back to Main and then back out to 99E. And so that really is setting up that initial kind of phase of infrastructure and utilities, which will ultimately be a catalyst for on-site development as well. And so we're actively designing that. We hired David Evans and Associates to do that design work for us. We're very close to 60% plans, and our intent is that when our master plan amendment is complete and adopted by the city, we will then turn around and submit permits for that street network, and really hope, ideally we would hope to be, by this time next year, have a construction project happening on site with that new infrastructure going on. So that in itself is a really exciting piece to really talk about new construction that's happening on site as well. With that work that we're doing related to the kind of block 1 infrastructure, we're doing a lot of coordination efforts both with ODOT and the city related to the McLaughlin Boulevard Enhancement Project. Again, making sure that the work that we're doing on site and really at the elbow of 99E and Water Avenue kind of complements and ties in well with what that project is as well. So that's a lot of exciting stuff related to really kind of the utilities and infrastructure on site. What I will say, I will echo what Kristen said related to getting this on Metro's RTP, as well as getting it on our own tribal transportation plan as well. It means that we have a much more competitive edge going after federal funding. And so we are looking to go after a RAISE grant, which is funding through FHWA, to really complete all of the infrastructure and utilities on site. And so we feel by putting it all on these plans and some great partnerships that we should be successful going after that funding source as well. Other work that we've kind of activity on site, well, first touch on about the environmental stuff, and then we'll talk a little bit about demolition as well. So on the environmental side of things, in May of 2021, we were successful in getting a EPA multi-purpose grant. So that is, EPA gives out 10 of those, or did at that time 10 of those every year across the nation. So it was a really big deal for the tribe to get one of those grants and get one of them here in Oregon as well. And so we were awarded $800,000 to help us with assessment and cleanup activities on site. So that was a fantastic grant, fantastic opportunity, and really has been complementing the work that we've been doing with DEQ on site as well. I know people were aware when we purchased the property in 2019, we entered into a prospective purchaser agreement, a PPA with Oregon DEQ. And we did that for really kind of two reasons. One, first and foremost, the tribe is not in the business of remediating brownfield sites. We have not remediated a brownfield site, but there are a lot of brownfield sites within the tribe's ceded lands. And so really, because we're not in the business, we knew that we needed to kind of get some expertise in the room. And so Oregon DEQ, with what they do, was really has provided some great technical information or technical expertise to us as we kind of negotiated this cleanup activities on site. And then second one was really kind of helping limiting the tribe's liabilities. And so when we entered into that PPA, we implemented a overarching work plan, and that work plan detailed out how we are going to go about assessment activities and ultimately cleanup activities on the site to get it to a point where Oregon DEQ would be happy to sign off and kind of give us a clean bill of health for the site. And so by doing that, it limits future liabilities of anything that may arise after we're given that clean bill of health from Oregon DEQ. And so that's really the two reasons we entered into that PPA. And now with the EPA grant coming online, we've been able to utilize a lot of EPA's expertise related to brownfields as well. And so some of the work that we've been doing underneath that grant, last summer we did a lot of work related to subsurface investigation work. So what we did know when we purchased the site, that we knew there was certain contamination in the site based on processes that may have happened through the paper mill or through the various other mills. So what we did, we knew some things. What we also knew is that we didn't know everything. And so, and what we also didn't know is that if processes and contamination had been occurring in one place based on an activity, had that contamination leached through the subsurface soils. And so the work we did last summer was we sunk 200 plus boreholes that are about 4 inches round all the way down to the bedrock on the site. And really the intent of that, or the purpose of that, was to see where contamination is and give us a better idea of kind of quantifying it, seeing if there was any impacts to groundwater, and then really kind of telling us had the material or had contamination leached throughout the site. And so we're still doing a lot of work related to the analysts on kind of analyzing that data. It kind of good and bad. The good is that it doesn't seem to have impacted groundwater, so we don't see any contamination in the groundwater, which is good news. The bad news is that it does seem that it's really kind of leached throughout the site. And so unfortunately what that means is that our cleanup activities ultimately are just going to expand as we've got to kind of clean up all the contamination through it. Another kind of body of work that we're able to complete last year was related to underground storage tanks, USTs. And so again, when we purchased the property, we knew that they were underground storage tanks throughout the site that were there to hold various maybe petroleum products or chemicals. We also knew that we didn't know where they all were either. And so we started a body of work to first kind of go throughout the site and do some ground penetrating radar. And so the purpose of that was to really kind of see where maybe USTs were on site. And so every time we felt like we got a hit that seemed like there was a UST underground, we physically dug down to either locate it or to say that, no, that was just an error in the data that we saw in the GPR. And so we were able to locate, I think ultimately it's been 5 or 6 USTs on site and working to remediate all of those. But one in particular that really highlights a lot of the challenges that we face on this site was one that we located this time last year. It was really in the center of the site, right where the old millwright shop was on the site. We got a hit on the ground penetrating radar. We decided that we would dig down and see if we could locate something. And when we were doing that, we located something a little bit unusual. And I'll back up a little bit and just say that since the tribe purchased the property and since I've been working for the tribe, I've had lots of great conversations with gentlemen that worked at the mill for their careers. And they would give me some great insights, honestly, sometimes even relations to where USTs may be. But one story that they all seem to tell is different variations, but it was similar themes, was that there was a buried locomotive on the site. And we laugh, right? Yeah, that seems crazy. It seems a little crazy, but so when we were located, we got a hit on the GPR. We were digging down. What we found when we were trying to find these underground storage tanks is that we found 2 railroad tankers that they'd buried in the ground and had used those as underground storage tanks. I have to say that I've got everything crossed as that is the myth that's been debunked, and there's still not a locomotive on site, but you know, that really highlights some of the complexities that we face with this site. One, that is they are a lot different to remove out of the ground than your typical underground storage tanks. And 2, they were never built to be underground. And so those tanks both leaked all of their products out, which was petroleum-based products. And so really there was a lot of leaching in the surrounding soils around that. And so we've done work to kind of clean up in the general vicinity of those tanks, but we know we've got further cleanup work to do because that contamination has leaked out through those tanks. So that was yet another good body of work to get done. Really kind of the next steps are, once we've kind of completed our analysis of all of those boreholes that we did and all the contamination that we find within those, it allows us to really kind of put in place plans for the remediation. And so for the most part, it looks like we're going to go through activities to probably remove material and put clean fill back in, but there will be certain areas where we'll probably have to cap it as well. And so that will allow us to put some plans in place that we can go after doing that. Another thing that I want to say when it relates to that grant is I never want to seem ungrateful for receiving a federal grant, but $800,000 is but a drop in the ocean when it comes to remediation work. And so it has allowed us to do some great work and really kind of do progress on the site when it comes to remediation, which is fantastic. But we've got a long way to go and some big bills that probably need to be paid as part of that. One thing that is good when it comes to EPA, that they've had an influx of funding through the various different through the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Law, which is great. So they have risen the ceilings on some of those grants that they have. And so we are going to be going back out this fall to go after another EPA grant, most likely in the region of about $4 million to help us with cleanup activities. So there's good news with that. Demolition work, and so Kent kind of touched on it at the beginning here, that the administration building came down at the front of the site. I think that, for me, made one of the most impactful pieces to it on site, and really kind of opened up the opening, the gateway piece to the site as well. And so since we purchased the property, we've demoed probably in the region of about 40% of the buildings, maybe close to 50%. We started at the southern end of the site where that red kind of highlight of buildings is there. That was really in response to those buildings that were kind of burnt down for an arson attack. So we took those buildings out first, and then we moved back up really to the north end of the site. So we took down all of the buildings in yellow in 2022, I believe it was. which is really related to the water filtration plant. I mentioned the millwright shop and the mechanic shop and the carpentry shop are really those yellow ones in the center of the site. And then in 2023, we took down that blue area of complex of buildings. And so that was everything from warehouse space to paper machine number 2, paper machine number 3. And so we took those ones down, and the latest one is that green area, which was the administration building. What I will say is that we've probably taken down the easy 50% of the buildings. Everything now just gets that much more complicated and challenging, whether it be its relation to, its location to the water, whether it be the fact that it may have a lot of hazardous materials. There's a lot of asbestos siding on some of those buildings, a lot of lead paint and some of the structure, the structural members of it as well. So it does get a lot more complicated going forward. We currently do not have plans for the next phase of demolition. What I will say is that I think we really want to pay attention in the next phase on these buildings on kind of the south, on the bottom end of this slide here, and look at those ones next. But we do not have plans at this stage to take anything down for the rest of this year. But what I will say is that we've done a lot of good work related to demolition, and I do want to keep that momentum going for sure. So now we're really kind of, I guess, getting to the exciting parts, which is redevelopment and what that looks like for the tribe on site. So what I will say, this is an overall site view. You've got to your left is really at the north end of the site. It's kind of connection to downtown Oregon City. And then on the right side of this slide is the southern end of the site and down by the falls as well. Kind of things to highlight at this kind of high level, and I've got some others that are a bit more zoomed in, and so you don't have to squint as much on those other ones to kind of see what's going on. But what we've been very intentional about is really kind of, Kristen mentioned it, but with Tribal Council, they gave us a lot of direction about what the priorities are for them for this site. And there's really kind of two priorities. It's the healing and restoration of the land is one of those, and public access. And so allowing the public back into the site, experience the river and really experience the falls. And so, along the lines of the healing and restoration piece, there's big kind of ticket pieces to that, which are removing a lot of fill that was brought into the site. And so as the operations of the mill needed to expand, whether they needed more warehouse space or a space to house another piece of equipment, they generally kind of filled in areas to create flat buildable land and then build a building. For us, we want to take some of that fill out. Some of those times that they did bring in fill, it was in a historic river channel. And so what you can see down on the southern end of the site is really taking out a lot of fill that's there today, a lot of hardscape, and allowing water back into the site. And really that connection with water and connection to this site is really a key piece to that healing and restoration piece. So that's a really kind of a key piece to it, and you can really see it along the shoreline where it's removing a lot of hardscape material and really kind of bringing back the basalt that's underneath it. And that's in kind of in conjunction with bringing a lot of greenery, a lot of the natural vegetation. And so whether that's the natural vegetation related to shrubbery or trees, but really kind of helping green up the site and allowing the plants to be a part of that healing piece, right? And it comes a lot when you talk about conservation projects or restoration projects, but allowing plants to help heal the site as well. And so you'll see that it's especially towards the southern end and towards the fall, there's a lot more greenery that comes in. Another thing that I do want to highlight is that we've been very intentional when it comes to the buildings on site and where they are located. And so there's a couple of things that I do want to highlight. One, if people are very familiar with the site, you know that by one side we're bound by the river, the other side is 99E and the railroad tracks, UP's tracks. So on the east side, on the railroad side, you've got kind of two big noise generators, right? You got Amtrak or you got UP flying through there, and then you've got the 99E, and both of those make a lot of sound. What that sound does, it bounces up, hits the bluff, comes back into the site. And so we've been very intentional about location of buildings along that to be kind of a barrier. So when you're kind of walking down Main Street, you're not hearing UP blow their horns as they go through, or Amtrak kind of whizzing by. So we've been intentional with kind of building placement relates to that. The other thing as well is that we've been intentional about the transition through the site. And so with downtown Oregon City here, you got a lot of structures, a lot of buildings, and we've kind of keeping our buildings at the north end as well. And so what you'll see is a lot more of a concentration of buildings up at the north end. And then as you move south through the site, it's definitely a transition from less buildings to more open space, more greenery, more native vegetation, more restoration of the shoreline as you get all the way down to the falls. And so we've been very intentional about that, and you can kind of see when it comes to the building kind of layout with that as well. So this is really kind of more of a zoomed in at the north end of the site. And so I'll highlight some of the pieces on here. I don't know if my pointer, I don't think my pointer will show up that well on. Well, maybe a little bit, can you see that? So I mentioned about the appropriations funding that we got to do the infrastructure, the first phase of infrastructure and utilities for Block 1. And so I'll highlight here is this is Water Avenue, goes into 4th into Main. And so that's that first kind of phase of infrastructure that we're currently designing and hope to be in construction next year. There's really a figure of 8 of the street network, and so that figure of 8 is if you come on Water to 4th, up to Railroad Avenue is what we're calling it today, to 3rd, and then back out Main Street to 99E. And so we're currently designing this phase. I mentioned about going after a RAISE grant to help with the rest of it, and so the intent was to complete this whole network with that grant as well. Other things that I do want to highlight in terms of these buildings and what they are. So I think that's number 2 right there. This is really front and center as at the site there, right along 99E. And so this building is kind of looking programmed to be a 3-story building. It will have kind of ground floor retail and office space on the first floor. The second floor would be additional office space. And then the third floor would be kind of an event center. And then kind of this kind of wooden area here would be an exterior deck. And so you can imagine if you have an event here on the views that you'll have of the falls and even the arch bridge as well. And so that's really what the intent is for that building there at the front of the site. This building right here, which is also on Block 1, and the building adjacent to it, which is on Block 2, those are both, they're both residential buildings. And so the first one on Block 1 is about 55 to 60 units. We haven't quite programmed it out depending on whether the studios, 1 beds, 2 beds, but it's around 55 to 60 units in it. And the one just to the south, to the right of it, will be about 85 to 90 units. Other things to highlight, it's not that exciting, but I will highlight it, is this structure right here. This is a parking structure. So we know with all this development on site, not only are we looking to do on-street parking on all of the roads, but we realize that with this development that there's going to be additional parking demand. And so this is a 5-story parking structure that's kind of nestled up there by the railroad tracks and 99E as well. These 2 buildings that are kind of identical side by side, we've kind of labeled those as flex buildings today. We haven't really gone through the programming of what they are, but they have the ability to be whatever the market demands, the community demands. And so whether that's, again, more ground floor retail, office space, whether that's higher educational space or institutional space, or whether it's more residential units in that. And so as we move forward with development of the site, we'll do a lot more work related to what the programming of those 2 structures will be as well. An other item that I kind of want to highlight is this structure right here is the old flour mill foundation. And so it's a structure that we we preserved and we saved when we were doing the demolition of the buildings around it. So you can kind of see some of that foundation sticking out of the ground today. But that's, again, a historic structure on site. And so we want to integrate that kind of historic structure into the site. It's a very much an educational, interactive type piece that really tells the story of the people that went through this land and the work that they did to impact the community, impact this site as well. Other things that just, again, kind of really note are, you can really see the intent around here about restoring the shoreline. So again, bringing back a lot of the basalt that's kind of hidden under some hardscape today, a lot of vegetation along that shoreline, so bringing that back as well. Other items that I mentioned about, the priority of public access to this site as well. And so there's some intentional public spaces throughout the site. And so we've been very kind of clear council's been very clear in their direction that, we're not just planning for one just very large public space, that there is many open spaces and public spaces throughout this site. And so the intent is that as people are returning to the site constantly, that they're getting a different experience, because they can stop at different places throughout the site and kind of get different views of the river or different views of the falls or whatever it may be. And so examples of that are around, I think that's number 7 there. This is an open space in the center of the site adjacent to the Flour Mill Foundation, a great place for people to come and gather in here. Right along next to the parking structure and adjacent to the road, this is a 60-foot wide open space. So again, allowing people to come into the site and get a different experience here as they would if they came in along Water Avenue and the river. And so we've been very kind of intentional when it comes to creating lots and many and different open spaces for people to be able to get different experiences as they come through the site. And then really this is all the southern end of the site. So again, some key things to really highlight are, I think this is one of the stark changes from the site today. Today this is all hardscaped. It's about 15 foot higher than the basalt, 20 foot higher than the basalt that's out there today. And so it's really removing all of that fill and allowing water to come back into the site and really be a connection point within the site as well. This structure right here, and this kind of the center-ish of this image, is the old Willamette Mill Foundation. Again, similar to the Flour Mill Foundation, we want to integrate that history and make it an educational piece, an interactive piece for the public that come through here as well. This building here, on the kind of the bottom of this image, at the really the west side of the site, this is the location of a hotel, and so it will be about 5 stories tall. I'm not sure we've programmed the numbers, but it's probably in the range of 80 to 90 units in this one as well. But this is a hotel. So again, you can imagine the views that you have of the falls and of the arch bridge with this one here. Other things to just highlight, again, I think it's quite obvious from the previous image that there's a lot less structures in here. And so you've got a lot more trails, open spaces to be able to kind of move through the site. This building here is similar to the ones just to the left of it, which were those flex buildings that I spoke about. Again, haven't really gone through the programming of it yet, but it really has the ability to shift to whatever the market kind of demands for it as well. Right here, it's hard to see, but these are kind of almost small little cabins, but you can kind of figure these as almost like small Airbnbs for people to come for the weekend, kind of be here in downtown Oregon City, experience the site, the falls, but also the downtown area here as well. And then this building right here is a location of a plank house. So this is really got that connection to water here, allows the tribe to kind of host cultural events, cultural practice, and really having that kind of connection to water. Today, this is very much a hardscape. There's an old foundation for a building that was there, but it's removing that hardscape and kind of renaturalizing the bank there as well. I always like to kind of stop on this one just for a minute or two, just because to me it highlights really the focus of restoration. So everything you see in green is really the areas that we're looking to restore on the site. And so that's whether that's removing fill to allow water back in, whether that's planting trees or vegetation through the site, renaturalizing shorelines. And really what you can see from here, it's about a 50-50 split when it comes to restoration. And again, just highlights the focus of restoration and the priority that Tribal Council has put on that for this site. And then this one is really just kind of highlighting the different buildings. So block 1 is office space here. I think it's about 90,000 square feet, which is up here. You've got on block 1, it's both office and residential for that number. The block 2 is the other residential buildings, around 60,000 square foot. Hotel is on 3 here. I think that's around similar. 4 is really just purely restoration work, as well as 10. 5 is the parking structure that I mentioned. On block 6 is those flex buildings. We can't label that flex buildings, but they've got the ability to be whatever the market may demand of that, as well as on block 7 here as well. Here are your little tiny cabins that I mentioned that are on block 8, and then 9 is the plank house that I mentioned here as well. But this really kind of gives you kind of the square footage of this site. And what I will mention that some of these numbers are exceptionally small. So this document, which is the Vision 2.0 document, is on the tribe's tumwata site. And so you can download this document and you can look at all of this stuff that we go over here today as well. So I think I've just got three more slides to go through. You can bear with me just for a few more minutes, but this one here is a rendering looking, if you're really standing on Main Street looking south into the site. So that is on Main and 99 East, that intersection in front of you. What you can see just to your right is that kind of the office building with the event center on top. In the background there is the 2 residential buildings. What you can really see here is that kind of 60-foot wide swath of open space into the site. And we understand this is a real gateway moment to the site. But our gateway moment really isn't just an object or a symbol, but really what the greenery and the vegetation that provides into it. And that green gateway moment is really the kind of the gateway moment into the site. And so it allows you to have views all the way down to the southern end of the site, but really that focus on bringing native vegetation and trees back into the site as well. This one is really focused on the center of the site. I was touching on it earlier about the kind of a gathering space at the center of the site. You've got, this is the old flour mill foundation that's kind of integrated into this public space here. You've got the hotel location that's in the background there. This is Main Street that's right in front. You've got the Willamette Mill Foundation is right there as well. But again, a great space for people to come and kind of gather and explore the site together. This one for me is always one of the biggest differences from what's there today until the tribe's kind of redevelopment. So today, it's kind of right in this yard area is what we called it, but it's hardscape, and it's hard to tell from this image, but you're about 15, 20 foot up from where that basalt is. And so today's elevation is probably more in line with where this cantilever structure is from the hotel. So it's removing all of that material out and allowing water back into the site and really kind of exposing a lot more of the Willamette Mill foundation, which is this basalt foundation that you see there today. You've got the hotel location here in the background. Again, you can imagine if you're sitting out here, the views that you'll have of the river and the arch bridge and the falls as well. But kind of this structure here really evokes a fishing platform. And so you can kind of see that structure giving you some fantastic views up and down the river. And I think this is my last slide, but this is down, if you're down at the southern end of the site, this is more of the lagoon area. You've got the hotel that's in the background there. So the plank house location is here at this southern end of the site. But again, today, you can kind of see in this image here on the bottom left, today this is hardscape. It's an old building foundation. a lot of asphalt, a lot of concrete. It's taken out a lot of that hardscape and renaturalizing the bank there. So bringing a lot more native vegetation and really having a much better connection to water and allowing hopefully a return of wildlife to this area because of this work as well. I think, yeah, that was it. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this site. I have to say that every time we talk about it, it's that much more exciting about what we're doing and getting the support from everyone here today. Just listening to us, it means a lot. And so I definitely appreciate the opportunity to talk about it, and I could continue to talk about this site for a lot longer. But so thank you for having us today.
Okay, so Ryan, I'm going to have you and Kristen come on up here if we could. Got a few questions to get us started. Again, if any of you have some questions, just go ahead and fill out the blue cards that are on your table. And we've got some folks from the Oregon City Business Alliance that'll be coming by to pick those up. So I've been kind of going through these, trying to lump some of them together. And again, we appreciate the slides, the illustrations, your understanding of what you want to accomplish from a cultural, historical, environmental, and economic basis as the pillars for this project. Obviously, one of the main things that we've always talked about was the public access to the falls. And we recognize that Block 1, which is where the administration building was located, that particular area, is mostly going to be office with residential. When do you envision being able to actually have the ability to allow visitors to get to a public access of the falls?
So what I will say is that with all the work that we're continuing to do, and we want to, the forefront of it is to get public access out there, but it's public access in a safe environment. And so our intent is that part of the reasons why we're really kind of being quite aggressive with this work when it relates to the infrastructure and the utilities in Block 1 is that we are hoping as we do this work, we can kind of progressively allow people into the site. And so the intent is to really, as we do demolition activities, as we do environmental remediation activities, as we start building out the road network, is that we can kind of move the fence line back and allow people to kind of come onto the site in a safe manner to do so. And so, really the hope is, with this work that will be the first phase is that we'll move the fence line back so you can come into the site here and explore it. And then when we, complete the rest of the network is move the fence line back again to allow people. So it will be very progressive, right? It won't just be one day you don't, and the next day you have complete access. It's definitely, it's going to be more progressive. And again, part of that is the sheer amount of work it does to take a building down or to clean it up and make sure there's no public health concerns when we allow people in. But one of the big pushes to get the infrastructure in it is to allow people to come into this site as soon as we can.
And you mentioned, Ryan, that you hope to be able to start construction of Phase 1 in Block 1 next year sometime.
We are, yeah, like I said, so once our land use amendment has been adopted by the city, we can then submit the permits for our plans. And so we very much geared DEA, David Evans and Associates, to be ready with those plans so we can turn around and submit those to them. And so we've been working closely with the city to date, with John Lewis and his team to make sure that when we give them the plans, it's not something completely foreign and new to them, that they've seen it, they've kind of come with us on why we're designing the streets the way they are. So we're hoping that permitting process is a somewhat streamlined process as well. And so really we want to start spending that appropriations money as soon as possible. And so we're hoping to be in construction next year as part of that as well.
Okay, is there any timelines attached to the EPA grants or other funding that you need to spend it by a certain time?
EPA's funding was a 5-year term, and so 2026 is when that will be, that term is ended. What I will say is, like I mentioned, we're going after EPA funding again this fall, and we can't go after that funding until we're 70% spent on our previous grant, and so we're at that spot. So we're going to spend that $800,000 way before the term ends on that EPA grant, and hopefully be in a new cycle of funding, which will be another 5-year grant to that as well.
And what amount will you be asking for with this grant?
$4 million is what we're saying.
$4 million.
Yes.
And what do you anticipate the total amount that will need to be spent?
It's going to be, I would say it's definitely tens of millions, honestly, especially based off the data that we're seeing, where it seems there's a lot more contamination throughout the site and not in just isolated areas. It just means you're doing a lot more work to remediate that. And so I would say it's tens of millions is a fair number.
And how, one of the questions was, how deep did you dig the test pits when you were analyzing the soil?
All the way down to bedrock, the basalt. And so it varies through the site. Up towards the east end, more towards the bluff, it's around 15 feet. It's pretty shallow to hit bedrock. As you get towards the river, it gets a little bit deeper, 20, 25 feet or so, maybe 30 feet. But each time we went to, we hit that basalt, we hit that bedrock, yeah.
Well, the good news is we have flooded there a few times. And
Sure.
when the floods come through, it kind of takes with it everything that's loose. So really, probably a lot of that soil was taken out during the floods and left the bedrock.
And I think, well, to some degree, it probably hasn't also helped with the contamination leaching. I think that as the water then maybe went out but percolated down, it helped probably spread some contamination. And so it's done some bad and some more bad, I guess might be the word. Because there's no,
you got to take the good with the bad.
There's no good to, it's no good to that.
So I actually, when I was on the board for the Willamette Falls Trust, did a lot of tours out to what was called the dance floor, which was clear out at the very far point overlooking the falls. Is that the goal eventually, to be able to get public access out to that platform?
So what I will highlight is to get to that platform, you have to go along PGE's dam here. So the tribe does not own any of that. So in terms of access, that is access that PGE would grant to allow people out there. What I will say is the work that we're doing is we've got public access all the way up to the dam and really past it all the way to the southern end, kind of southern tip of our ownership here. And so, there's definitely, within our ownership, we're trying to make sure we create as many opportunities for people to get some kind of great views of the falls. And so whether it's up here looking down at the top of the falls, or again from the hotel getting some views up towards the falls, we're trying to make sure that we give people many opportunities to do that as well. But that piece is within PG's ownership.
Okay. And one of the people, and I'm kind of looking at your illustration, they said, well, why don't you place the hotel closer to the bluff so that you don't block the view of the remaining part of your master plan on the land that's to the north. If you notice where the hotel is located, it kind of juts out a little bit. And so conceivably, the office building or the residential structures in Block 1, Block 2 may have their view of the falls partially blocked. But that was just one of the questions, that you had considered moving the hotel back closer towards the bluff.
I think I think we have looked at it. I think by moving it closer to that bluff and not having it kind of stick out as much, you're moving that whole footprint back, which means there's be less space around it, right? Less public access space around it, because it's occupying more of a footprint on the internal site. What I will say is, I think for us, part of a selling point of getting people to in and out of this hotel is its views. And so I think that alone is kind of really the focus of that.
And you don't need to answer this if you don't want to, but what size casino could you put in that main floor of the hotel?
I'm going to say 0.
I know, land use codes wouldn't allow that. I don't think.
No, I mean, we're not looking to a casino here at all. I mean, honestly, the site is so constrained.
I know.
From just an access transportation thing with a casino, it would never in a million years work. And
well, and I'm thinking you talked about a 5-story parking structure that you plan to build. If you had a use like that, you'd need a lot more than a 5-story parking structure.
Yeah.
I think it's actually about 6.5 acres that's usable out of the 23 acres.
I think it's a little higher than that number, but it's not a large percentage of the site, honestly.
Yeah.
And we are limited height-wise when it comes to all the structures on the site to, I think it's 75 or 80 feet. So, and that is a land use, a code requirement, so we don't impact the views of the people on the bluff above.
So at full build out, what do you anticipate in the way of office, residential, commercial, retail, cultural center?
In terms of like the
Size.
like size, or I think, we do have. Honestly, this writing is so tiny, but right here it says the total development for all those is 331,000 square feet, and then the parking structures below it is 150,000 square feet. So the total, including the parking structure, is 478,000 square feet.
Okay. I'm going to jump into some of these questions, and I'm just going to read what they say.
Yeah, go for it.
Most of the site is in the 100-year floodplain.
Yeah.
Remediation, transient room tax from hotel to OC tourism, or residential limited to tribal members.
Is there a few questions in that one, I feel like?
I'm reading the card.
Okay, I'll go through what I thought each question is, and if I misspoke, maybe whoever wrote it can answer. But so, you know, what I'll say is I wish we only had to deal with the 100-year floodplain. And what I mean by that is the city adopted a floodplain in 1996, and so when we had the 96 floods, that actually supersedes a lot of the 100-year flood. And so that 96 flood kind of line work on a map kind of comes through the site, splits it to about a third, comes down towards the river, and then kind of dissipates out towards the river. And so there's a lot of sections within here that are within that floodplain area. And so we are doing work where anytime we're removing a structure, removing some fill, removing something from the site, we're trying to capture that volume so that when we look at here, we're having a positive impact on what that floodplain will be. So this alone, where we're removing a lot of fill within this river channel, will have a huge impact on what the floodplain would be, just because you've got a lot more storage within here than there is today. Other things that we know of, again, this hotel location is within that floodplain. So we're doing a lot of work relates to the 96 floodplain. And so when the city adopted it, they adopted it based on aerial views. But within this location, there was no elevation adopted with it. And so we're having to do work with LiDAR, et cetera, to come with an elevation, and that's will be part of our land use amendment, an elevation for that floodplain. And then when we ultimately come to look to design hotel, we'll make sure that the first floor elevation of that structure is above that elevation line. So,
okay.
So I think that's question number one. Question number two was, there was something about hotel credits and something.
Yeah, transient room tax from hotel to OC tourism.
Okay, that is maybe above my engineering head.
Do you pay taxes? I guess the question is, do you pay taxes?
Yeah. So yes, the land is held in fee, and so yes, we would pay taxes on it, and any sort of taxes coming in through transient lodging would go to whatever the mechanism, Oregon City. Yeah, yeah.
And, but the tribe doesn't pay any state taxes, do they? Do you pay any taxes on the revenue that's generated from this?
So it depends on so if it's held in fee, then we would pay taxes.
Okay, just like a regular company.
Just like a regular, like you own your house, you pay taxes on it.
Okay.
Right? So it's, if the land is held in fee, that's just like how anyone else owns land.
And that's the case here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good, that's
Yeah.
good to know.
Yeah.
Because we want you to make a lot of money. So do you have an idea, as you're talking about the remediation, to kind of open up these little inlets for wildlife habitat, how many cubic yards of debris you actually are going to have to excavate?
I'm probably going to underestimate it, but it's probably got to be it's got to be getting close to 100,000 cubic yards. I mean, it is an astronomical amount of material that was put here to get to the elevations that we see today. And so I don't think it's outrageous to say that it gets up towards 100,000 cubic yards.
Do you have a place to put it?
Not at this point, but we can. Yeah, well, that's a good question. It's something, those types of details we haven't really kind of thought about, figured out, but we will. That's something we will have to look at for sure.
Okay, and I'm co-chair of a group called the River Assets that engages Gladstone, Canby, Oregon City, Westland. Have you ever considered water transport, say from Clackamas Park, if people wanted to go ahead and park down there, get on a bus or get on a water vessel of some kind to access your project? Will there be any docks for people to moor a water vessel here?
So there is a current dock right now, which is right here. I think it's the permit, or the people that own it is the Oregon City Boat Club. So they have a dock there. It is very difficult to get a permit through DSL to get a dock, especially in this location. I think we would love to collaborate with the Oregon City Boat Club and really kind of have a dock that can be, get them access to the site, but really for all to use. And so, then you've got those opportunities for things like that to happen as well.
So, and I don't know if you can answer this, and I appreciate that answer. How will Tumwata Village impact the property taxes of Oregon City and Clackamas County, and is federal grants an issue as well? But you're saying now that you own it in fee, you're treated the same as everybody else.
Correct. Yeah. So we will as we develop it, assume the city would start assessing our property as we start developing it, increasing its value. Our property taxes would go up, and because it's held in fee. Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Great. And I'm just going to read the card.
Yeah, I don't mind.
Given that the Willamette Falls Trust is spending most of its time on this is going to get into a little bit of a political thing. The Willamette Falls Trust is spending most of their time on the Westland side of the river, despite significant funding and major donations were given to the Willamette Falls Trust with the intention of investing it on the Oregon City side of the river. What is the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde doing to partner up with the Willamette Falls Trust to ensure that both sides are utilizing those funds to the best advantage in order to create river walks?
Yeah, that's a good question. What I will say, just to kind of make everyone aware, when we went through this kind of exercise with this Vision 2.0, obviously we looked at what the redevelopment plans were for the tribe, but we also looked at what public projects could impact or touch this site. And right, examples of that are the public river walk project that you spoke about. Other examples are within Oregon City, they have within their transportation system plan to have another elevator that would take people up from the site and over the bluff. And so we made sure that the work that we've done on site complements that, right? Doesn't prohibit those types of projects. And so, making sure that there's space for a project like that to be able to land and kind of take people up there. The other one as well is the Westland Oregon City Ped Bike Bridge, right? ODOT did a lot of preliminary type work. One of the corridors for that project would land here at the north end of our site. So again, the work that we've done here when it comes to design of both the site and the streets is to make sure that we do not prohibit any of those types of projects. And so the same with the Riverwalk project. The partners, I think back in 21, 22, approved the initial phase one of that public Riverwalk project that would basically take people from the elbow of 99E all the way down to kind of 4th and Water, and then on an elevated structure all the way down to here. And so the work that we've done in and around this area is to make sure that we don't prohibit that type of project. And what I will also say is not only to prohibit, but we are, as part of the design work that we're doing for this initial phase, is that we are building a 14-foot wide multi-use path that is really, and a promenade that is really kind of the start of that Riverwalk project. Now, we haven't requested funds to do any of that, but we are, by doing the work we're doing here, we are almost starting that Riverwalk project. And so we would, I believe that partnership is unfortunately sunset at this moment in time, but there's funding, especially from the state parks, for that project. I think the tribe would be happy to come to the table to make sure that that project does happen, and that phase does, especially the initial phase does happen. And so anything that we can do with any one of those partners or the state or even the trust to make that happen, I think the tribe is willing to have those conversations. Because like you said, there is a lot of funding related to that project that is on the table. Not only what the trust has said they raised to date, but also the funding that's come from the state for it as well. And so I think really any opportunity that we can have to realize that that project here, we've done work to make sure that it can happen here on this site with what we're doing. And anything we can do to make it realized sooner rather than later, we'll be happy to have those conversations.
Yeah, and I believe Metro and their parks bond also earmarked.
Correct. Yes.
Can you remember the exact amount? Was it millions?
It wasn't a small amount of money by any means. So yeah, it would really help, allow this to continue to kind of take off to what its ultimate goal was.
So when you envision phase 1 in block 1 of the office and residential, will the river walk that is basically in between the buildings and the bluff and the river, will that be constructed at the same time?
No, we're constructing as part of this infrastructure work to the streets and the sidewalk. We're going to construct a multi-use path that connects with the McLaughlin enhancement project, and really is what was kind of outlined as part of the Riverwalk project, is this promenade, wide sidewalk promenade on here. And so we are designing that now to construct that as well.
So you will be doing at the same time you're doing the buildings in
No, so the buildings, so I'm talking, when I say block 1 stuff, I'm really talking about the infrastructure in the streets. There is no time frame for those buildings on there in the interior. We have not secured funding. We haven't really gone after funding for those. And so although we've done work to kind of get them to this level of knowing what will go in them and their footprint and their size and stuff, we have not secured funding to construct those. And so we will just be constructing the infrastructure in the streets first.
And that's what you're talking about starting next year?
Correct.
Okay. All right. What along 99E do you see? Additional right-of-way dedication or some dedicated turn lanes or anything like that that'll be required?
Great question. So when this site was master planned originally in 2014, as part of that process, there was a trip cap placed on site at 700 p.m. peak hour trips. And so all of the required improvements for on-site redevelopment were captured as conditions of approval as part of that original master plan. So one of those projects includes the improvements that have been done on McLaughlin Boulevard coming down the hill. They are installed sort of that variable message sign that's like the curve warning sign, putting new lights sort of in the railroad tunnel, I'll call it. So that was one of the projects. The second project is a dedicated right turn, right in, right out at Water Avenue. And then the third project is what I call a jug handle. So it's an out of direction left turn. So you won't be allowed to make a left turn into the site off McLaughlin there. Instead, you'll head down Railroad Avenue and you'll go 1 block out of direction, and then you'll come and go straight through the site. So those 3 projects were all tied to the original master plan, which was tied to a trip cap. Our site redevelopment is staying underneath that trip cap, so those will be the only projects that are triggered as part of on-site redevelopment.
Okay. One final question. What excites you the most about this project? I love to put them on the spot.
No, I'm going to try to say it without crying. I really look forward to the day that my children, as part of the tribal community, can walk through this site.
That's I think that's definitely for me. Seeing my family go through this site and let them experience and feel the falls, I think is very powerful and very exciting. I think just, when you see what this, you see our plans here for redevelopment, and you see what the site is there today, it is, transformational is not really even a term that does it justice for this site. It really is powerful to be a part of it, powerful to be a part of the team, part of the tribe that gets to be able to kind of change this site and transform it and heal it and restore it. But you know, for me, it's not just my kids, but it's my kids' kids that'll have the opportunity to go through this site and really kind of experience it, and you know, they have that connection not only to place, but to, you know, for me, that helped transform this site. And so it's beyond like a legacy type project, you know, it's more than that. It's I feel fortunate to even just be able to step out there and have a piece, be part of this project. As some days as challenging and overwhelming as they may be, it's beyond rewarding to be able to be part of this project.
I think everybody that's here today hearing what you're sharing also believes that this is such a hidden gem. Right. That has had no public access to be able to view it for over 150 years while this was all industrialized. And now we finally have the opportunity to achieve that reality where all of us and our children and our grandchildren can experience this firsthand. And we probably wouldn't have considered this 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So, well, we want to thank both Kristen and Ryan for coming today. I know because of the lighting, it was hard to see some of the slides, so if any of you would like to get a copy of their slide decks, just contact Sherry over there at the entrance desk or myself.